trade deals in and of themselves are always difficult to pass in Congress. And in this particular case, we've made it much harder in that the calendar is now working against the president in that he lost the House. You have an election in 2020, so a lot of candidates are now starting to position themselves on this trade deal. You've got a prime-ministerial parliamentary election in 19, and you have a new government in Mexico. So all of that means it's going to be harder. Now, I've been on the phone with members of Congress on the Democratic side, both at the Senate and the House side and staff, and I have a sense that there are paths of getting this done, but it's going to be a large part on how the president and his team behave going forward.
How much of this is sound and fury and threats that are coming through, and how much do you think it would really be a situation where they decide not to pass it? Because just thinking back to during the negotiations for all of this, it was both Republicans and Democrats who were saying if the president scrapped NAFTA and got rid of the treaty, that would be a horrible thing for business. Isn't this basically the same thing? I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the Brexiteers and the no-exiters in Britain who are now dealing with the situation where, look, this is the best deal you're going to get. Take it or leave it. And the EU is not willing to renegotiate.
So I think your read on this is absolutely correct. If we have no deal in North America, and the president specifically threatened this last week that he's going to withdraw soon from the sitting NAFTA, which would be disastrous for our equity markets. It would be really, for a guy who says he cares about the price of the Dow and the S&P, this would be horrific. That being said, the path ahead, these are always really hard to do. But in talking to Democrats, I think they want a deal, but they want to see this deal enhanced and improved and amended in a way that I think it's a win-win for American workers. It's a win-win politically. And there are some very specific things they've already begun to identify that I think are reasonable things to bring up and have conversations about.
Ambassador Larry Bossidy, I'd like to just change the subject a little bit. If you were to give advice to the Canadian government, given the situation they're in with the Huawei matter and the arrest of the CFO and the request of the United States for extradition and the retention now of 2 Canadian citizens, what would be your advice to their government?
So I think my advice is going to be what's going to happen today. So today, Foreign Minister Freeland and the Defense Minister Sajjan Harjit will be in Washington meeting with Pompeo and Mattis. These are normally scheduled high-level meetings that take place between our two countries. But I think today's a day where we have to have a very serious conversation that, look, this is an extradition law. This is by justice and law. This should never, ever fall in the realm of politics. And the president's language this last week is unacceptable. And we're going to need to make sure that we clarify that this is by law and not by politics. If he turns this into a political scenario going forward, I think he's really putting a vice on our best friend and next-door neighbor, Canada. And I think the Canadians are going to tell the Americans that.
Okay. Again, back to this idea of thinking we can renegotiate the deal. How likely of a situation is that? Because it feels like we barely got over the finish line with the deal that all 3 countries just agreed with. You go back and start opening this up, and man. Yeah,
well, it depends what you ask for and how you implement that. So first of all, there are a lot of good provisions in this agreement, but I think upcoming Speaker Nancy Pelosi has made it very clear that she wants to make sure that they're enforced. And where are the enforcement provisions in this? And are they strong enough to uphold the agreement that we put together? So she says enforcement, enforcement, enforcement. Second, they have a $16 an hour wage level. And all they're saying in the Congress side is, well, why isn't that indexed to inflation? We have a 25-year-old NAFTA.
Okay.
Can you imagine setting wages 25 years ago?
I hear you, but if you index that to inflation, I mean, that was already a huge give for Mexico because obviously they're the ones who are going to have to start paying more, not the United States and Canada. You want to go back and ask Mexico to do that, you may be dealing with a very tough negotiation and one where you get nothing out of it. Are they willing to risk what is probably a better deal for no deal?
You know, I hope that we can find paths to compromise. So I think that the word that needs to be held both with this upcoming budget negotiations in the next 2 years is, are there paths to compromise for this president, or it's going to be confrontational? I think there are paths to getting this done. You know, there are a lot of side letters to these agreements, and side letters can be done without reopening the entire negotiation. So there are a lot of things that can be done here to find paths to compromise and getting it done so everybody can claim victory on doing something for the American worker and our economy. But if the president withdraws from NAFTA or he basically pushes his bill forward, I think it's going to be a tough road this year.